Hi, my name is Grace Curtin, and this is my review of Rising Phoenix. So, Rising Phoenix is a Netflix documentary that came out in 2020, and it's all about the Paralympic Games. And it follows specific athletes as they talk about like their stories of how they became disabled, how they're able to play the sport that they do, and just other personal things about them. A couple of specific athletes are Matt Stutzman, Tatiana McFadden, and Bebe Vio. And there's a lot of others, but those are just a few. So what I liked about this film is that it was just an overall great film, very uplifting. This is the kind of topic where it was just like you can't hate it. You really can't. Um, but I learned a lot about the Paralympics, a lot of stuff that I would have never known. It's so much more complex than I thought. Truthfully, I didn't realize it was such a huge event, but I'm glad that I watched this because I think it was super informative to me, and I think that everybody should watch it. And then I learned a lot about the athletes as well. I loved how they told some of the stories. I liked how they included people who were born with a disability and then other people who became disabled later in life. And I liked how they talked about different athletes playing different sports. I thought it was a well done documentary. One of my favorite parts about the documentary as well was how it talked about how the athlete's disability impacted both the athlete and their family. I think it was a really cool touch because they could have just talked about how the athlete was impacted by their disability, but they talked about how their families were given hope by the Paralympic Games as well, which I think is really cool and probably something that a lot of people don't think about. And then these last two bullets are just things that I learned, and I like these quotes in the film. The first is that para is for parallel and not paralyzed. Truthfully, my whole life I thought it was paralyzed. So it was really cool to learn that and kind of a reality check for myself. And that all bodies look different. I thought this was such an awesome point made by, I think BB said it. But when you watch the Olympics, all the athletes are like peak physical, athletic physique. And in the Paralympics, they all look so different because of just different disabilities that they have, but they all have to come up with different ways to play their sport or compete. And I just think that that's really awesome. Really like the film. I don't want it to come off like I didn't like the film, but a few of my dislikes were I wish they talked more about how each athlete was able to figure out how to play the sport with their disability. Matt is a good example for me. I wish they talked a little bit more about how he figured out that he was able to like shoot a bow and arrow with his feet and have the strap that attaches. I just think that that's like a really awesome design, and I wish they talked a little bit more about like maybe the trial and error that was involved with that. Um, but yeah, different athletes like that, like the swimmers and just different athletes where they're not playing or they're not competing traditionally. And then how they got into the sport. I wish they talked a little bit more about that. I know some of the athletes were um, playing the sport before, and then they became disabled through whatever it was, and then they were able to continue in the sport. But I was wondering if maybe any athletes like who became disabled later in life got into a sport that they weren't necessarily into before. And I just think that would be a really cool thing to touch on. And I personally think that they should have focused more intently on maybe fewer stories or maybe just made the documentary longer. But I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But like Tatiana McFadden's a good example. She has so many medals and she competed in so many different things. They kind of just glazed over that. And I think that they could have gone into more depth because that's such an amazing story. I read the film review by Leslie Felperin on The Guardian, and it's called Stirring Salute to the Stars of the Paralympics. Leslie overall really liked the film. It was a great story, very much like my feelings about the film. The two major complaints that Leslie listed were telling the audience to feel moved. I did kind of agree with this. Leslie thinks that like the film just told you too many times that you should feel like inspired and moved by these athletes. And I don't agree with this one as much, but I can see where she's getting at. And the second one is they didn't focus enough time on each athlete. Leslie was saying that She thinks that the film cut each little story too short and didn't allow the audience to kind of get to know every athlete as well as they should have. And I 100% agree with this. I felt like I didn't really know each athlete even though we watched a whole film on them. I felt like the only one I really felt like I knew was like Riley and Tatiana McFadden, but other than that, the other ones I just felt like they didn't talk to them enough and portray their personality as much as I would have liked. So that was probably my biggest complaint that aligns with this film review is also I just think that they should have focused more time on each athlete. Overall, though, I think it was a great film. I really liked it. I'm really glad I watched it. I've been telling people all week to go watch it. But my biggest complaint is still the lack of depth for each athlete. But like I said, it's still super inspiring. And I think it still did its job of bringing awareness to the Paralympics as a whole and the athletes' stories. Um, it kind of seemed like that was a little bit the point when they were talking about how the funding got cut, but I think they achieved their goal of bringing awareness and just talking about these really amazing and inspiring athletes. Um, and yeah, I just thought overall it was a great film. Couple complaints, but still did the trick.